about to listen to Speak Up, Show Up, Lead, the podcast, where we speak our truth, show up anyway, and lead from the front. Follow me. Let's go. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Speak Up, Show Up, Lead, the podcast. I'm here with Bryan Grenon, retired Brigadier General. But before we get started, just want to make sure that I put another plug out. Speak Up, Show Up, Lead, my book. A story of grit, growth, and leadership from the ground up, all the way from my childhood, lessons learned through military service and beyond, up until now, even business ownership. It's on Amazon.com. Speak Up, Show Up, Lead. Well, Bryan, how are you doing today?
I'm great, JJ, and thanks for letting me get on your show. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for being willing. You know, we like to have a diverse a group of guests, and you know, you've done some great things, and I think your story and your philosophy will inspire a lot of people. If you don't mind, I'm just going to let everybody know real quick. So Bryan Grenon, he's actually a retired Brigadier General. He's also retired from the Seattle PD as the assistant police chief, and he's coming here to share with us a little bit today about what he's done, maybe a little bit about his background, and talk about his 4 C's, which is a leadership philosophy and lesson that he might give us today. So, if you want to go into a little bit about your background and maybe tell us about those 4 C's, I'd love it.
Sure. I think you mentioned that. I spent 35 years in the military, in the Army National Guard. Simultaneously, I also had a 30-year career in law enforcement. And so got to see kind of the both sides of the equation there. You know, when we talk about the military, we talk about leadership in the military. We also talk about leadership in a law enforcement organization, which is a semi-military organization. And then after I retired in law enforcement, I went to work. I'm still working in the corporate world, and so I've really seen leadership from quite a few different aspects. And with that, I've had the opportunity to kind of distill down what I call my 4 C's, and I'll get into that and kind of how I came about that in a minute.
Okay, sounds good. And what's your favorite thing about your background that you always like to share? Maybe not your 4 C's, but just an important lesson that you've learned from both serving so long in the military and the police force. If you wouldn't mind sharing something with us.
Yeah, I think it's about service. We talk about it, and people talk about it all the time about service. But one of the most gratifying things for me is I've had the opportunity to see service, selfless service, not only in the military but also in the law enforcement side of the house, and that's really about people that are giving everything for a purpose or for a cause. In the military, when we deployed, you are sacrificing yourself for your country, for your mission, for your fellow soldiers. But in law enforcement, you're putting yourself in harm's way for that purpose to arrest that person that is going to, inflict harm on somebody or cause damage to society. And that's pretty noble both ways. And so for me, that's gratifying that I've got to see that and understand that from a deep down perspective.
Yeah, I can see that. And I'm actually very passionate about the police force, the fire department, all that stuff, because we may put on when we go on active duty, we may put on the uniform and train and train and train, but you guys are out there, the ones putting yourselves in harm's way here domestically every day, not just when you're deployed. So it's
Right.
it kind of holds a place in my heart that's a little bit different than my brothers and sisters that have served in the military, but you've done both. So I mean, now I'd like to hear a little bit about these 4 C's, maybe how you came up with the philosophy,
Sure.
and tell us a little bit about that. I think that in itself is going to bring up some great conversation here.
Yeah, yeah. So when I became a brigade commander in the military, I was constantly asked by junior officers, senior NCOs, what is it that they can do to get promoted? And I had to think about that. What is it that we look for when we're as the raider, as the senior raider, and you're evaluating the performance of a soldier? What is it that you look for that sets somebody else apart from somebody else that may not get promoted, that may not move up further in their career? And that kind of transition beyond that from just how do you get promoted to what are those traits, what are those concepts, what are those principles that I've learned that are critically important, one to get you promoted, but also to make you a good leader. And I distilled that down to four C's: character, commitment, competence, and candor. uh, More broadly, it can be communications, but I really like candor, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then I refined that when I got promoted to general officer. One of my duty assignments was at Fort Sill as the deputy commanding general for the National Guard. And for those of you in the military, we know that Fort Sill is a major TRADOC base, and by that meaning it's a major training base that has basic trainees. It has advanced and senior NCO development training. It has basic officer training. It has advanced officer training. It has warrant officer training and senior officer training. So, I mean, it really had the gamut. And one of the privileges that I had was the ability to go in and talk to those groups of soldiers. And and they only give you a few minutes because you don't want to disrupt their flow. But they always wanted leaders to come in and talk to them, and so I really had to kind of come up with an elevator pitch in my mind. Is what is it that I want to convey with about 15 minutes that I thought was powerful enough that can help maybe resonate, and that's why I came up with my 4 C's. And I think it's pretty basic, but it just kind of comes down to the simple things that I think really work. And when we talk about competence, or I'm sorry, commitment, and I'll get into competence here in a minute, but when we get into uh, character, competence, commitment, and candor. So for character side of the house, it's really about what is it that you want to be as a leader, right? We want you to be virtuous. We want you to attain the highest ethical standards. That really is, yeah, non-negotiable as a leader, and it's not just in the military, but it's also in law enforcement, and it's also in the corporate world. Right? You have to be able to set that standard. And I'll give you an example. From the military side of the house, right? That standard is you have to be physically fit as a leader to lead, right? If you're not physically fit, you can't lead people, and you are going to fail as a leader. I mean, that's just as basic as that, right? But conversely, your subordinates and your peers are always watching you, right? So if you're not living to those highest ethical standards, right, and if not living that life that you need to lead, right, then you are not going to be perceived as a leader. And perception is reality, and that's unfortunately what that is, and it's about. So character is also about how you are as a person, right? Are you toxic? Right, and we've heard a lot about it in the military, but you'll see it also in the corporate world and in law enforcement, right? How do you treat people, right? If you are demeaning to somebody, if you treat them without respect, right, you are going to lose trust. You're going to lose confidence in the people that you work for, right? So you need to be fair. You need to be firm, but you need to be fair and treat people with that respect that they need. And I'll give you an example. Uh, on my first deployment, this was way back in OIF 2. And we were deploying overseas, and one of the brigade commanders that my battalion ended up working for was probably the worst, most toxic person that I've ever seen in my life. He treated people horribly. He embarrassed people. He shamed people. And I think he was highly effective. He made colonel, right? Because I think at the time the Army judged that person on results, not on where they got there. But the reality was is that nobody wanted to work for him. They got results because they were absolutely in fear of that leader, and it was effective for a short period of time, but it didn't engender any kind of trust or support. And in my mind, I just like I cannot ever be like that person. I mean, it just a light bulb went off, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to mark this down as something never to do, ever to do. Treat people with respect, because I don't want people that I lead to be thinking the same thing about me, that I've embarrassed them, I've shamed them, right? Because what we do, whatever, regardless of the role that you do, is honorable, right? You are doing the right thing, especially in the military and law enforcement and others. It's the right thing to do, and we need good people there, and you don't want to drive them out. So and then to be honest with you, I learned through my own experiences, when I, on the military side of the house as a battalion commander, I mean, I think I had initially some of those toxic, you be a little bit harsh, maybe raise your voice and to demand, but you learn off that, and you kind of self-reflect, and you get feedback, and you just say, you can't do that. So as I got promoted, I grew and realized that toxic behavior is a destroyer of units, a destroyer of culture, a destroyer of people's willingness to do the right thing. And then I'll give you another example of character in law enforcement side of the house. So if we go back to the summer of 2020 in Seattle, there was a lot of massive protests and craziness that were going on. And in one specific area, we had a protest. We had a precinct that was surrounded, and it was, for a law enforcement perspective, it was just miserable. I mean, the officers were working, 14 plus hours a day. They were just beat, and it was day in and day out that was going on for a week and a half. But they understood the mission, right? They needed to protect this area, and and they went through hell to do that. And then, just like overnight, the mayor at the time decided, yeah, we're just gonna give up that area, and pulled the officers out. The protesters came in and created what we call the chop zone in Seattle, and all the loudness and all the other problems that happened there. But the lesson there is that the mayor never came down, never spoke with the officers, never conveyed anything, never talked to them. And as a result of that, that mayor lost the trust of the officers completely, right? Because of politics, because of optics, right? Didn't want to do that, right? But lost touch with humanity, and lost touch of that personal leadership that empowers people. And when that was gone, the trust was gone. So there was an example of that I think is, you know, poignant from my experience. For competence, uh, you know, I think it's probably a no-brainer, but we want competent people, right? You need to be competent to get promoted, right? But what is that incompetence that's important, right? And it's really about being the master of your own craft and knowing how to get things done. You're never going to be an expert, right? I think you said you were a warrant officer, right? And, as an officer, you're never in the Army, even in law enforcement, you're never going to be an expert, right? There may be like niche people, right? But if it's a generalist, you're never going to be an expert. But if you're going to try, be an expert student, right? Be curious, be a continuous learner, and always keeping up to speed on what your area of specialty is, to make sure that you're on top of that, right? But the key there is you need to invest that time to learn, right? You have to master that role and those around you. And here's something that I think folks that tune in that are in the military would understand that. But you know, I mean, this is a given. Think about how often, you know, picture yourself back many years ago in the military. How often have you been assigned a specific task or a specific role that you're expecting? You know, okay, I know this. I'm going to go in and I'm going to do it, and you know, I'll do this well because I know that. And then at the very last minute, somebody calls in sick, somebody gets injured, you know, something happens to that person, and they look at you and they say, okay, Grenon, you're up. You got to go in and give that briefing on this topic for that person that, you know, you didn't prepare for. You didn't know. You're stuck, right? You know, and you have to deliver, right? Because that's about competence, right? And I think Andy Warhol said that everybody gets their 15 minutes of fame, right? And there are times when you're going to get that 15 minutes of fame, whether you're prepared for it or you're not, right? And so it's about being prepared and anticipating potential outcomes, right? So the key there is about that constant preparation, understanding what's going on, but then that calculated anticipation. Okay, if something were to happen and I got put into that role, what do I need to do? Right. So being that continual learner, knowing what's going on, knowing those roles of people around you, and then being prepared for when that 15 minutes of fame strikes you, you're prepared to execute and you're ready to roll, right?
I like how you said 15 minutes of fame. When you're thrown into that, it doesn't feel like fame. It feels like, oh crap.
Yeah, it's like the pucker factor, right?
It
Oh,
is. Very familiar with that one.
yeah, yeah. And the other piece, the other component here is commitment, right? Being committed is showing passion and loyalty to the people that you work for or work with, right? Knowing them personally and empowering them to take charge, right? And I saw this in the corporate world. Um, you see a lack of commitment, and it's fairly common. And for example, many corporations and CEOs have a, you know, a message that's out there, right? A mission statement that says in the very first line, we are committed to our employees. We're committed to our people because they are the backbone of what we do, and without them, we can't succeed. And then what you'll see is that company will get acquired, um, you know, through the back end, and that leader will come out after the acquisition and they'll say, "Hey, don't worry about it. We're in a great shape. Things are great," you know. And then a month later, everybody's getting laid off, or they're going to lay off everybody, right? So it's, where is that commitment, and how does that engender trust from those employees, right? Rather than being transparent from the beginning and saying, you know, here's the potential outcomes that can happen, right? So that commitment is that commitment to your employees, and maintaining that trust from all echelons within that organization, right? Commitment is also about investing that time needed to excel, right? It's about that time, right? You and your team will do well those tasks that get your attention, right? That's an age old thing, right? People only do well those things that you check, right? It's also about your attention. If you don't provide that attention, if you don't invest that time into it, then you or your team aren't going to do very well. Candor and communication. Really, you know, I mean, communication is the more general term here, but I really want to be specific about candor, right? Because I think candor is critically important. And with that, uh, uh, you need to possess that internal fortitude to be able to tell the truth, even when it's unpleasant, right? Your boss needs to hear it. Many times in organizations, and I've seen it in the military, and I've seen it in law enforcement, and also in the corporate world. These bosses are surrounded by people that only want to tell them what the boss wants to hear, right? Military is a great example. You've
Uh-huh.
got senior leaders that have this big team around them, right? And everybody wants to tell them what they want to hear. But the reality is that boss wants to know the truth, right? They want to know if something's going to fail, or if something has a high probability of failure. And many times you've got people in the organization, even some of the most junior, that are just unwilling, to stand up and say, "Hey, boss, this could go wrong," right? And that's critically important, to have that the internal fortitude to be able to stand up and do it for the organization, for the people, and for the mission, whatever that is. Uh, you need to be able to challenge the ideas constructively. And on the communication side of the house is that as a leader, whatever echelon that you're at, being able to convey clear, concise, and transparent intent, direction, and desired outcomes. It's really about creating that shared understanding. Um, and I'll equate this back to, on the military side of the house, you have a commander's intent. And right, really, what is the commander's intent? It's really about the task, the purpose, and the end state, right? The end state is really about that desired outcome. And if you can communicate that effectively, um, the the team, the organization moves much more effectively because they know where to get. Whether that's creating a metric, right? We need to create this many widgets at this time, right? Or in law enforcement, right? We need to arrest this bad guy, or this multitude of crimes that are being committed in this specific area. So we need to stop it and arrest those people. Or in the military, it's about, hey, let's go capture that hill, right? How are we going to get there? We're not going to tell them specifically, right? Because they're going to figure that out. But what are those steps needed in order to be successful? And if you can outline that clearly and effectively, then people aren't wasting time trying to figure out how to get from A to B, right? They can come up with their own subtasks to be able to get that moving forward. So, in a nutshell, that's really my four C's, that I think, based on my experience and observations, I think are, something that will be helpful down the road for many people.
These are good because, when it comes to leadership, in my opinion, it's all about making sure you model to the younger people what you expect and what you want to see all throughout your organization. It's kind of creating a
Right.
culture. And so if these are your evaluation points, through making sure that your people are fitting, it seems like to make sure that they're fitting the culture that you desire in your organization, then it's really good. And I think that's where a lot of civilian leaders fall short.
Right.
Is, for one, they don't really identify their values, and they don't identify what's important to their company culture. And so when they bring people in, they fire fast because they check all the blocks on the resume, and then they did an okay interview. But what they don't identify is, who do we value in our organization the most, and how do we interact together. And these are values, these are uh, leadership points. These are everything. I mean, you're basically saying that this is how you identify your good talent based off of their reviews. And I think that a lesson can be learned military and civilian side for all of this stuff. I think this is a really good way of doing that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where I kind of distilled that down, because I knew that, obviously this is something that's critically important in the military, but it's also very effective in law enforcement,
Yep.
right? Because those are all the things that, to be successful in law enforcement, you need to do, right? And you need to be good at your craft. You need to empower people. You need to treat people with respect, not only the people that work for you, but also the public.
Yep.
And it's I think it's for me. I think it was effective in being able to get across what I want, what I expect, but also what you could take from it in order to be better.
And so while developing these character traits, what was the most instrumental thing that's like, what, I'm not going to be just the average leader who goes out and identify that just because I'll be honest with you, you already know how this goes. Oftentimes, when you're in a leadership position and it's time for you to write an OER or an NCOER or whatever the equivalent evaluation is in the police force, and I don't know if it works there. I know this happens in the
Yeah.
military. Oftentimes, that person will write their stuff up, hand it to their supervisor, and whether it's looked at or not, that usually ends up being that person's evaluation. And
Yeah.
so for you to actually take the time to create this, you know, how how, how did you decide, there had to be a tipping point. I don't really know how to articulate what I'm trying to say, but there had to be a tipping point in you creating these that said, "You know what? I need to be more intentional about this." I was wondering if
Right.
maybe you'd want to talk about that for a second.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said in the beginning, when you have young officers asking you, what are those things that I can do to get promoted, and I had to think about that. And it's like, here are those things that as a leader that I value. And you talk about on the military side those evaluations, but the reality is, especially as a senior rater, you've only got a certain amount of folks that you can fit into those, the highest ratings on there, and you have to make some hard choices, right? So as a general officer, you may have 20 lieutenant colonels that you're a senior rater of, and eight colonels, and a whole bunch of majors, and you have to boil that down and say, okay, who are my top few, and how do I rank that, and what are those traits, what are those things that we look for, right? And it's spelled out on the evaluation, but
Mhm.
then what are also those other things, those intangibles that based on my experience and my observations will make that person be a good leader, right? Because at the end of the day, especially in the military, but also in the police work, uh, it's not just about okay, what's best for that person, but it's what's best for the organization, right? What's best for the army, right? If I say that this person is my number one person, then that person needs to be good for the army and good for the country, right? Because you never know what position that person is going to get put in. And conversely, in law enforcement, it's the same thing, right? They may be that person that leads a high risk warrant, where lives are on stake, right? We want that right person in that right position. And those are the things that I think were critically important for me, based on my experiences, that translate well um, to being a good leader.
Hmm. I've had those conversations, not only in the military, but when I transitioned out and I started working for other companies. Uh, it they oftentimes there you have bosses that really don't know what to say when you start asking them those questions. How do you get promoted? Sometimes they'll give those cookie cutter answers like, just keep on doing the right thing and work hard and you'll
Mhm.
get promoted. Well, good God, everybody knows that.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Put your nose to the grindstone and just work. Yeah,
put your nose to the grindstone. Just that's
yeah,
right. But I mean, if you know exactly what things would help in your eyes that you have seen, and you can break it down to more detail like that. I mean, it's expectation management. And a lot of people struggle with expectation management.
right,
If they don't know what they value and what they've seen that your organization values, then of course they're not going to know how to answer that. And so
right,
I mean, I guess for anybody who's listening, I challenge you to also consider that that platform for your organization. What do you value and what is the best thing for your company? Because you shouldn't just do it when you're evaluating your people. You should also do it when you're hiring people because
right.
that's how you're going to get them to fit and not quit.
Right. And then, part of that communication, the candor piece of that is being honest, right?
Yep.
Here are the things that I think are important, and lay that out as whether you're a leader, in an organization at whatever echelon that you're at, and to be able to lay that out and say, hey, these are the things that are important. And then let's have that discussion.
Yep.
Maybe they're not important to you, but they're important to me. And let's talk about it.
Yep. Agreed. Well, this is the time of my podcast where we're getting close to the end here. and I ask everyone the same question because I believe that there are some people who are in their transition, whether it's from the military or from job to job,
Mhm.
and they're at a very dark point. And so I would ask you, sir, if you wouldn't mind, what would your piece of advice be to that person who is stuck and trying to get to that next phase in their life or try to accomplish that thing that just doesn't seem like it's working?
Well, you got to be persistent, right? Because like in anything, if it's worth accomplishing, then you need to put in that time and effort. So you need to be persistent about it, right? The skills that you got. So if we're talking about a transitioning military person, the military does a fantastic job of teaching you those skills that are valuable to the business world. I saw that time and time again when I was in the corporate world. Right, those skills that we learn, the discipline, the leadership, the communication pieces of all those things that the military does, right, and inculcates into you throughout the daily life, and then also in the training. Those things are extremely valuable in the military. So be persistent and being able to explain that what do you bring and what you offer to those prospective employers. I think will go a long way. And we're kind of in this troubling time in the economy where there's a lot of layoffs. There's a lot of folks that are out there looking for jobs, but from those folks that are from the military, you have that step above that will differentiate you from somebody who doesn't have that, and it's that persistence and be able to communicate the what you bring to the fight, what you bring to the table. I think will pay off in the end.
I agree. And learning what those needs are so that you can communicate
Yeah,
that based off of the organization. That is such a valuable thing. And
yeah,
that's one of those things, sir, that they don't teach you in TAP in the transition assistance program. So thank
yeah,
you for sharing that. Um,
yeah.
well, we're getting ready to wrap it up. Is there anything else you want to share with the audience here before we put a cap on the show, sir?
No, I truly appreciate your time and listening to an old guy like me. For me, I find it's extremely valuable to be able to share some of my knowledge, some of my experiences, and be able to help other folks, in whatever organization they're in, be better and be more successful. I found that this is something that works for me, and hopefully it works for you.
Well said. Thank you very much. And I appreciate you being on the show as well. It's
Yeah,
good to have people from a diverse platform sharing their experiences and lessons from the years of whatever they've done. And for you to have two very important, um, one public service and one defense service. I mean, it's kind of a diverse platform that I haven't had on here before. So a
that's
background
good.
rather. So
I'm
thank you
glad I
for
could help.
well, thank you for being willing to come on here. Before
Yeah,
we end, real quick, I want to put another plug in for my book, Speak Up, Show Up, Lead. It's my story of grit, growth, and leadership from the ground up on Amazon.com is where you can purchase it. For everybody who's listening, please don't forget to like, subscribe if you're on YouTube or Spotify. But don't forget to share this with your platform, with your audience, or comment below if there's something important you want us to talk about or whatnot. So that ends our conversation today. And thank you for Bryan for being on here, and thank you everybody for being a part of my journey for the last couple of years.
yeah, my pleasure.
Everybody, yep, and everybody have a good day.